It's a pleasure having you on the show once again. This is Omobola Stephen, your host on Life Well Lived. Life Well Lived by Omobola Stephen is the self-improvement and personal development podcast with the occasion of expert and professionals who come to the show to share disruptive mindshift content on topics on the personal development and self-improvement. Today on the show, I have Gabriela Rosa, who is a Harvard University awarded scholar of fertility specialist, clinician, and best-selling author. Not only that, Gabriela is the founder and director of the Rosa Institute. Welcome to Life Well Lived, Gabriela Rosa.
Thank you so much, Omobola, for having me. It's lovely to be here. Absolutely.
It's lovely to have you on the show, Gabriela. Now, I'm looking forward to your expertise on today's show. Now, we're going to be focusing on women and fertility. Now, that's very important and a dear discussion for me. Now, let's talk female fertility. Why do lifestyle count?
That's a really great question. And I will even take one little step back in that question and say that fertility is a team sport. You know, it is never something that is only up to the female, because as we know, we have a situation where we have a 50-50 equation in order to be able to create a baby. We need the egg and we need a good quality egg, but we also need excellent quality sperm. And so what happens is that in standard therapy, in medicine these days, a woman is very much the focus of the trying to conceive equation. But in my opinion, I have been doing this work now for 20 years, you know, helping couples overcome infertility and recurrent miscarriage when other treatments have failed. And I have seen case after case in treating thousands and thousands of patients in every continent other than Antarctica, that it is never only up to the woman. And so from the perspective in which we look, you know, from that lens, we need to understand what are the things that a woman needs to do and that a man needs to do in order to optimize their chances of not only taking home a baby, but taking home the healthiest possible baby, especially when the path hasn't been straightforward. And that will come down to the question that you've just asked, which is, you know, why is lifestyle so important? The truth is that for the vast majority of humans, the exposures that are in our environment, whether they're lifestyle, diet, chemicals, you know, you name it, those things are all going to play a role in how our body responds to whatever is around us. And it will, in one way or another, respond and react to that exposure. So let me give you an example. You know, we all have heard of people who have never smoked a day in their life and die of lung cancer. Right? And then you've got those people who are chain smokers and never develop lung cancer after all. And the reason for that is what we call epigenetics. It's an arm of science that studies and understands what are the differential reasons why people exposed to the same chemicals, the same things, develop a certain condition or a particular version of a condition and another person doesn't. You know, so basically with epigenetics, what happens is that the person who is a chain smoker who never develops lung cancer and the person who never smoked and develops lung cancer, their bodies respond to stimuli in a different way. So in the same way, it applies to fertility, to reproduction, to, you know, for one person, their health predispositions might be their musculoskeletal system or their nervous system or their digestive system. For another person, it's their reproductive system. And so when you ask me, you know, why is it that lifestyle is so important? Lifestyle is only as important as the foundation for optimum health. Because if we give the body the opportunity that it needs to be the healthiest that it can be, typically it will work well. If things aren't working well, if we're having symptoms, if we're having disruptions in the way in which the body's operating, then we need to ask why. We need to understand what it is that we can change and what it is that we need to do more about. Does that make sense? So lifestyle is important. And I often say to my patients, you know, the key to understanding what are the things that you need to do to optimize your chances of taking home a healthy baby is actually quite simple. It's to act pregnant now to get pregnant later. And it applies to both men and women. And I know that if men could get pregnant, we would be in trouble in terms of population growth. But, you know, they would really think many, many times before wanting to have a baby, you know, come out of their reproductive system. And so what happens is that but let's just, for the sake of this example, let's just pretend that men and women can both deliver healthy babies or can both deliver babies, okay? What would happen, and the act pregnant now to get pregnant later analogy really is looking at what are the things that if you were pregnant right now, if you were pregnant right at this second, what are the things that you would immediately start doing or stop doing to ensure that your baby developed in the healthiest possible way and that you could deliver that healthy baby to term, right? That question is extremely important because if you think about it, a pregnant woman, what is the first, you've had 4 children, I've had 2, you know, what is the first question that pops into a pregnant woman's mind when she discovers that she's pregnant? Isn't it, oh my God, I hope my baby's going to be healthy? Or is my baby going to be okay? Right? That is the first question that a woman, like the second that you see that positive pregnancy test, you're like, is my baby going to be all right? Right? And so then you start to think about all of the things that you are doing, not doing, should be doing, you know, to really make sure that you give your baby the best possible starting life. And so this is what couples really need to almost embody at this point on their journey before a conception is even in place. Why? Because by 8 weeks gestation, which is around about the time that most people find out they're pregnant, a baby's health blueprint is set for the rest of their life. A baby already has all its little organs, all its little fingerprints. Really, all that is happening to that child from 8 weeks gestation to delivery is that it's developing and growing further. Right? But there's the majority of their health predispositions are already in place in the genetics of the parents and grandparents, because this is another very important consideration. Fertility is a transgenerational concern. And the reason for that is that, think about this, Amabola. When your mother, you see, women, we are born with all the eggs we will ever have, okay? So when you and I, when our mothers were in their mother's wombs, you and I were already in our mother's womb. So we have been gestated in our grandmother's wombs as well as our mother's wombs. So the exposures that our grandparents had at that time will also have trickled down generationally to us. So when we say, you know, what can we improve? What can we do to improve fertility a month before we actually want to be pregnant? You know, we're asking for a lot. We're asking for a very short-term impact on a generational situation here.
That's right.
And so what happens is that we really are asking a lot of our bodies. And many women, you know, when they are experiencing difficulties and experiencing challenges, they blame their body, they blame themselves for, you know, what's happening. But the truth is that there shouldn't be a sense of blame. There shouldn't be a sense of, you know, it's your fault or it's their fault. Like I said, first and foremost, we have the egg and the sperm, not just the egg. We are not asexual creatures. You know, we can't reproduce asexually. And we can't reproduce from one gamete. I mean, some fish can, some other animals can, but we can't. As humans, we need 2 gametes. And so basically, we need to take that whole picture into consideration. And of course, there are many things that you can do, starting from, as you've asked, lifestyle. How can you improve your health, and so on and so forth. But those are things that we do need to take into context as a whole, not just take pieces of this puzzle and try to have a full puzzle just from its pieces. Does that make sense?
Sure. Right. Now, you talk about conception. Prior to conceiving, when is the right time for a woman to visit the gynecologist? And what are the things, or what are some of the important things to expect?
Yeah, no, look, that's a great question. You see, it's really interesting because I remember being 11 years of age and getting my period for the first time and thinking, oh my God, what do I do now? You know, and I spoke to my mum, obviously, as you do. You know, you just go to your mum and they say, something's happened. And look, you know, in my household, everything was actually always very open. You know, if my mum had a period, she wouldn't be hiding from us that she had, you know, a bloody pad or whatever. And so I had the opportunity up until the age of 11 to ask many questions in terms of, you know, why does this happen? How often does this happen? And, you know, all of these things. And I had a really kind of straightforward thinking mum, who's amazing. And I love her so much. And, you know, one of the very first things that she did was she said, okay, here's a calendar. Now, what you're going to do for every day that you have a bleed, the very first day you mark a cross, and for every day of that bleed, you mark a cross. And you do that every single time that you have a period. You know, and that is such an important thing that most women, you know, I have been astounded as a women's health practitioner to discover in my career that the majority of women do not know when they're expecting a period. They do not know what part of their cycle they're at. They do not know when they're about to ovulate. They do not know when they're about to, you know, get pregnant or have a baby, or, you know, like, it's astounding to me. And the reason that I say it's astounding is that this is basic, empowering women information that is essential to know. So the very first thing, even before we go to a practitioner, the very first thing is for women to understand their cycle. You know, is to understand what is normal for them. Because just because textbook normal is a 28-day cycle does not mean, you know, myself, for example, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome at the age of 18, which meant that I had gone for months to years without having a period. And had I not known, you know, this, and it started to happen when I was around 18, up until from 11 to 18, I had regular periods, and then it started to be very irregular. And I then got diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which incidentally, polycystic ovarian syndrome creates irregular cycles. There are other metabolic conditions that may be associated, insulin resistance, diabetes, and so on. Thankfully, I've never had any of those other conditions, but certainly have had many of the symptoms of polycystic ovarian syndrome in my lifetime, especially irregular cycles. But even through those times, I would actually, every single time that I got a period, I would mark it down in my calendar so that I knew what was actually likely to be happening around that cycle and when I was likely to be getting another period and so on. When we look at a woman's cycle, typically for most women, it's a 28-day cycle with two different distinct phases. You know, the follicular phase and the luteal phase. The follicular phase is the first half of the cycle, and the luteal phase is the second half of the cycle. Ovulatory components that happens in the middle. So ovulation typically happens around day 14. When a cycle varies in length, generally it's the first half of the cycle that varies, the follicular phase, that, you know, becomes longer or shorter. Typically, the luteal phase is about 14 days and it stays around that. If it's shorter than that, there is what is called the luteal phase defect. That can also lead to infertility. It's more likely if you have an irregular cycle that the first half of the cycle varies, but the luteal phase stays the same. And that does not typically cause infertility other than a difficulty in timing intercourse for conception. Because if you don't really know, I mean, the egg lasts 12 to 24 hours in an entire month, right? And the sperm can last 3 to 5 days. So if you have intercourse, say on day 10 of your cycle, and you ovulate on day 14, great, you're still likely to catch that egg with the sperm that are already going to be there. However, if you have intercourse on day 10 of your cycle and you don't ovulate until day 21, and you're not tracking, and so you don't know, you have missed that timing window completely, which means that it's not even that you are infertile, you just have been timing intercourse in a way that's not going to, or you just had untimed intercourse. So that is never going to actually yield a pregnancy. But when women first, kind of approach menarche and they start to have periods, start to develop breasts and so on, the biggest reason to see a doctor is the well woman visit happens typically for most women around 13 to 15 years of age, right? And it happens when there is a change or a major change of symptoms for that woman. For most women, it's always a good idea just to, make sure that whatever is, if everything is well, like for example, if a girl has started to have a period but all is well, they don't need to see an obstetrician gynecologist. Typically, obstetrician and gynecologists generally are the same people, just to kind of give you a little bit of context there. Sometimes they don't do both roles. So a gynecologist ensures that women's health from a reproductive perspective is well, and the obstetrician typically delivers babies. Now, when I was studying, like more than 25 years ago now, I actually ran an obstetrician gynecologist practice. And all of the OBGYNs that were there, they used to be gynecologists and, do well women visits and or visits for women who are having symptoms and difficulties in terms of their reproductive health. But they also all delivered babies, which incidentally is a very difficult profession. You are going to be up at all hours of the night and day. My boss, my direct boss, actually, he lost his driver's license many times because, he would have to be speeding to deliver babies. And of course, the police didn't think that was a very good reason for him to be speeding, and so that was quite funny. Well, it was funny, but not funny, if you know what I mean. But so that's the difference between the two, okay? And a woman who would want to just go, if a woman is not pregnant, she has no need to see an obstetrician. If a woman is pregnant, then obviously the obstetrician or the midwife are the people who are going to be taking care of her throughout her gestation, throughout her pregnancy, and helping her to deliver that baby, typically, right? I mean, some women deliver at home. And, my mom had my sister, she delivered herself, actually, on the kitchen floor. So, and then she went to the hospital. But that's essentially what happens, is that mostly the obstetrician or the midwife is going to deliver a baby. A gynecologist is going to see a woman for, healthcare in terms of reproductive function. And reproductive health can be so many things. I mean, reproductive health can be infused with mental health because, some women have premenstrual syndrome or PMDD, which is a much, dysphoric disease syndrome, which is a much kind of stronger version of PMS. So, there are many reasons as to why you would see someone, but typically it's a change of symptom situation. When things go from being well to not being well, you definitely want to talk to an expert. Even if those symptoms are common, you want to check that there isn't something severe or that there isn't something that is of a major problem that you should be aware of. And the other factor too is that, again, like I was saying, the well woman visit is a good idea. You can just go to your primary doctor and just have a conversation around, hey, these things have happened. What do you recommend? And they will ask you a series of questions and, they will refer you on if they feel necessary in your particular situation, your particular case. But it's always a good idea to just be aware of your symptoms, be aware of your body, be aware of the changes that happen so that you can then correlate those changes over time and understand what is normal for you. Because what's normal for you might be might be different to what's normal for me, which is different to what's normal to another person or to my mother or to my grandmother or to whoever. So you need to be aware and understanding of what's normal for you, but tracking your cycles. And these days, there are so many apps that you can use. There are so many ways in which you can do this. But I find that tracking your cycles is the number one paramount action that a woman has to take to be empowered about her reproductive health, whether it's because she wants to avoid conception or because she wants to achieve conception. Understanding her cycle is going to enable her to do both of those things.
Right. Thank you for that exposure. Gabriela. Now, avoiding conception, right? That's one aspect. Now we want to talk about delay in conception. Now the reality stares at the face of nearly 65% of women, right? So I need you to tell me what are some of the factors that contribute to delay in conception, because we know that this is a reality and we can't shy away from this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, 1 in 6 couples is infertile.
Right.
And or experience, difficulty in conceiving. And this is globally. So because I know that we have a short time frame for me to answer this question, what I think that will be the most useful thing for your audience, I'm more than happy to gift anyone listening to this. They can go to the show notes of your show and, I'll give you all the details. And I'm more than happy to gift a copy of my book, Fertility Breakthrough, Overcoming Infertility and Recurrent Miscarriage When Other Treatments Have Failed. Because in that book, and it's actually available for free on Spotify, people can listen to it. They can listen to it on audible.com. So, the biggest thing that people need to understand in terms of when conception is delayed is to get to the bottom and the absolute clarity of why it's happening. Still to this day, 40% of infertility is diagnosed as unexplained. Amabola, let me ask you this question. When was the last time that you solved the problem that you did not know you have?
Gabriela, you caught me napping here.
I know. And you see, that is the answer that, essentially every person has, because the truth is, how can you solve a problem that you don't know you have? You can stop symptoms momentarily, but then that will recur and you won't even know why it's recurring, because if you don't know what the root cause of that problem is, you don't have a solution. You may have a Band-Aid at best. You may have, some good luck through IVF, for example, right? A lot of times couples go and do IVF because they think it's the silver bullet. Well, the reality is that it isn't. In my clinic, I treat people who have gone through multiple failed IVF cycles in order to have a baby and still have no baby. The latest statistics, and this is published data, on 178,000 IVF cycles, it showed that on average, for a couple to have a close to 80% live birth rate, or to take her home at close to 80% of the time, they need, on average, how many cycles do you think they need? How many IVF cycles do you think that a couple needs on average to take home a healthy baby at approximately an 80% rate? Just give me a number. How many cycles do you think?
This is your area of expertise. You can go ahead.
No, but I know, and this is why I'm asking you. I want you to just kind of think, okay, well, how many IVF cycles might I need to have a baby? How many do you think? Just like, I know this is not your area of expertise, but if you were to just think about it, how many cycles do you think would you say? I'll tell you the answer, but I just want to know what your thoughts are.
A cycle.
How many?
A cycle.
8 cycles, you know that, yes. That's right, 8 cycles of IVF is what a couple needs on average. So that means that you have you have some people who have 30, and then you have some people who end up with less than that. But the truth is that for the vast majority of couples, it's not a situation where you go and do IVF and it works. It's only about 30% of the time in a cycle it works. So the truth of the matter is that until we understand what are we dealing with and why do we need IVF, we are going to, for the most part, keep going around in circles. And for many couples, the sad reality is that they go around in circles for so long until they run out of time altogether, right? So IVF is a wonderful technology and it's miraculous in many ways. And some couples will never conceive without it. However, one of the things that I'm seeing and that I have been seeing as a trend for many years now is that the majority of couples who actually get referred to IVF don't need IVF. They need to clean up their lifestyle. They need to clean up their diet. They need to time conception effectively. They need to ensure that they are as healthy as they can be and that they work together as a team in order to achieve conception. They don't need IVF. Right. And so for the people who have blocked fallopian tubes or have other issues, yeah, sure, they need IVF, but they also need all these other things at the same time, because otherwise, guess what? we are not going to get close to the outcome that we have anyway, right? And what we've demonstrated to the patients in my clinic is that we have a 78.8% live birth rate, couples taking home healthy babies, with the majority of them not having to have IVF at all. About almost 50% of the patients in that 78.8% conceive naturally. And for the patients who actually do end up needing IVF, it's 1 or 2 cycles, not 8.
That's
right? So this is the power of dealing with a problem you understand you have, as opposed to, you know, unexplained infertility. So that's the difference. And I think that, you know, for the most part, that distinction is missed in many cases and many situations, which is a great disservice to the patients who not only spend thousands of dollars to try and have a baby, but then who on top of that end up with no baby because they didn't actually really truly understand what was the problem they were trying to solve to begin with.
That's right. I think information is very important here, Gabriela.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%.
That's right. Now let's talk about the nature of ways that we can boost fertility.
The things you can do to boost fertility all boil down to the things that everybody already knows, right? From a self-care perspective. So there are 2 different stages of this. There is the part that only a person can do, and there is a part that only a clinician, they can only do with the help of a clinician, right? Because what happens is that the self-care aspect, which is what you choose to put in your mouth, what you choose to put on your skin, what you choose to have in your environment, those things are things that for the most part, and not entirely, but for the most part, only a person can control. The other part, which is what I call what they don't know, they don't know. They need someone like me to help them to understand what it is that they don't know, right? Because, and often that part, what you don't know, is the biggest part that's going to make the greatest difference. Because ultimately you can, and I see this happen again very frequently. People say, oh, you know, I've done your Fertility Challenge program, which is my free program online that people can access. And that will give you lots of tips on the things that you can do on a self-care level. So, you know, I've done your Fertility Challenge, I've read your book, but I still am having difficulty conceiving. I still have problems getting pregnant. And I say, well, that's because you're missing 80% of the equation, which is the part that you don't know. Right? And that requires very diligent diagnostics in terms of what are the biochemical pathways that are being affected. Because if you think about it, what we have at the outcome level of a situation, which is inability to conceive, inability to keep a pregnancy to term, is an outcome of many biochemical chain reactions that begin much before that. Right? And so the pieces in the middle that are stopping a couple from having a baby, what I call minor factors, they compound each other. And there's lots of data out there to show that the more minor factors you have, the less likely you are to have a baby. And if you have up to 3 minor factors, that is enough to give a couple an average of 40 years time to pregnancy. No one has 40 years to get pregnant. And a couple at peak fertility gets pregnant in 3 months. Literally, it's have sex, get pregnant, have a baby, done. We're no longer having this conversation. So you see, there's a huge distinction between there being quote unquote nothing wrong and there being even minor things that are getting in the way, stopping you from having a baby. And if we don't get clarity on those pieces, we again keep going around in circles. So from the individual's perspective, it's that analysis that I was talking about earlier, which is act pregnant now to get pregnant later. What are the things that you would start doing? What are the things that you would stop doing? If a person is not doing any exercise, well, that will be useful for them to start to do some. If a person is eating only junk food, well, vegetables is going to be a really great start. Right? If somebody smokes, drinks, get rid of those. Like, would you do that if you were pregnant right now? Would you be drinking and smoking if you had a baby in your womb right now? The reality is that every single person listening to this already has 50% of that little baby that they want to create within themselves right now. And so if we're not taking care of those cells, if we're not taking care of the health and optimization of the health of those cells, we are decreasing our chances of taking home a healthy baby or taking home a baby at all.
Right. Now,
So
this is
those
very
are some of the
profound,
things.
Gabriela.
Mm.
Right. Thank you once again, Gabriela Rosa, for that incredible insight. So I want us to get to the bedroom matters. I hope you don't mind.
Oh, let's
Yeah,
go.
because I know that you're an expert in this regard also. Do men and women experience sexuality differently?
You know, it's interesting that you say that. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert, but I do have Talk Sex with Gabriela Rosa podcast that I interview many experts on this topic. But look, men and women do experience sexuality differently, even just from the context of how our hormonal balance occurs and hormonal changes occur throughout the month. You know, a man's kind of libido, so to speak, is pretty static, right? Now, if he's extra stressed, if he's not sleeping well, if he has, you know, if he's an alcoholic, if he takes drugs, all of those things will depress his libido, and it will be depressed in a continuum, right? In a constant. Whereas for women, our libido increases and wanes. And so, and it happens because why? Well, it happens along the same side, the same ovulatory cycle that we have, because nature has a major game plan, which is to make women have babies. Now, you and I know that there are certain times in our cycle that there is no way that a man, any man, no matter how hot he is going to come anywhere near us. Right?
Not at all.
No, it's just like, no, this is closed for business, right? It is just not happening.
I like that.
Yeah, it's just like, no, not happening. But then there are times in the month that we will just like be waving all the flags of the universe, right?
Present
like,
here.
Come here now, right? And that window is very, very small, but it happens, and it's very acute when it does. So, you know, our kind of hormonal balance and, of course, our libido as a result changes throughout the month, consequently because of how our body works in terms of ovulation. You know, and of course, prior to ovulation happening, that's when we will be at our most aroused. And then afterwards, we will probably not be very, very interested. We can be persuaded in many instances, but, you know, for the most part, it's not going to be the same kind of drive, right? And again, I'm generalizing here, but that's essentially how it goes. And if a man is at a normal libido or a high libido, they're just going to want to have sex a whole lot more than a woman throughout the entire cycle. And so there are situations that can actually create a little bit of an imbalance in terms of two partners, and their libido mismatch can cause issues in the relationship. But it doesn't have to be this way. In fact, I actually recommend, I interviewed a fantastic sex therapist in one of the episodes of Talk Sex with Gabriela Rosa. I think it was episode 6, actually. And I would recommend people looking at that, which is a low and high libido situation where couples may have differential libido, and how to meet in the middle somehow. Because sometimes it's not about, you know, a person enhancing or increasing their libido and the other person decreasing it. It's realizing that there are different levels of experience that you can have sexually with your partner. That, you know, some days a partner perhaps with higher libido, they would be happy just to cuddle or just to be made to have an orgasm. They don't necessarily want to have intercourse, you know, vaginal penile intercourse. But, you know, and so having those conversations and understanding that there are different levels of intimacy and different levels of sexual interaction, and how you can negotiate and navigate that in a relationship is very, very useful. So that episode is definitely one that I would recommend.
Sure. Thank you once again, Gabriela Rosa. Do you have any projects in the pipeline you'd like to share?
Well, I do have many projects. One of the ones that we've completed just recently is an assessment, a predictive assessment for patients who are trying to get pregnant. And it helps them to understand their probability of taking home a healthy baby via our program, via not doing anything and trying naturally, via doing IVF, and or, you know, the combination of some of those things. Understanding the probability rate of those, you know, conception attempts helps people make decisions in terms of their fertility moving forward. And so I'm constantly working on improving that. I'm definitely working, you know, in we're releasing a women's health program later this year. And so that's another big kind of, focus that I have at the moment in making sure that that's happening. And of course, I am working on my doctorate of public health. I've been applying and I'm waiting on a response, which takes forever. But that's definitely happening sometime in the future.
Great. I wish you best of luck in all your future endeavors, Gabriela.
Thank you, Amabola. Really appreciate it.
All right, Gabriela, do you have any other information you'd like to share with my audience?
Yeah, look, I think that, those two pieces that I've mentioned earlier, the book and the predictive assessment, I will give you all the details. You can add that to the show note. I think that people can really benefit from understanding what it is that they need to know about their specific situation. Because, like I said, the biggest issue that couples have is that are trying to conceive and are having delayed conception is that they don't know what they don't know. And staying around in that vicious cycle just causes them to run out of time altogether. And we don't want to see that, for patients who are really, dearly wanting to be parents and dearly wanting to have kids. So that's something that we can definitely help, and they can go ahead to the show notes and get more information about all of those pieces. And if they want to find me, they can just Google Gabriela Rosa, Gabriela, so it's 1 L Rosa, Gabriela Rosa.
All right, Gabriela Rosa is almost everywhere, right? Good to know.
Pretty much. If you Google, you will find me.
Good to know. Can you share your website and your social media links?
Yes, fertilitybreakthrough.com is our website, so people can just go there as well. All right.
Thank you once again, Gabriela Rosa, for your time on today's show. I really had impactful and exciting time having you on the show today. Really worthwhile indeed. I can only wish you the best of luck once again in all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much, Amabola, and thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing in helping people self-actualize, find answers for themselves and educate, people who really need to understand more. And I think that as humans, that is our birthright, isn't it? To get clarity, to understand more about who we are and what we are and how we serve in the world. So thank you for all the work that you do as well.
All right. Thank you for that kind words. I'm humbled, Gabriela. Thank you, audience, for joining me on the show. Now, if you'd like to catch up with any of my missed episodes, just go online and search for Sexuality by Mobile Steven on any podcast distribution platforms you bump into, or any course promotion platforms you bump into online, and you have an amazing time. Perhaps you'd like to be a guest on the show. You can hook me up on my mailbox or mobile@steven.o@outlook.com. Now, I'll be looking forward to your mail. Till I come your way, I need to stay safe. With all my love, I talk to you soon.